So I'm going to jump now, and we're going to have a discussion here on sort of a summary of interesting things that have happened through this year, things that we can talk about that may happen next year. And so it's going to be an end of the year review and kind of outlook for 2024. And we have several subjects that we're going to talk about. We're going to try to get them in here real quick. We know we can't go 2 hours. But the first one I want to talk about, and I want to really pose these questions to you all, is number one is emerging threats. And those are emerging technology threats. What threats do you see that are new kind of upcoming threats that businesses need to at least have heard of and be aware of to look at that may pop up in the future for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what I would say first is let's just look at the email side of things. I heard an interesting quote earlier today, and I need to kind of delve into it a little bit more, but I heard that, today's world, the threat actor that performs fraud through business email is actually finding it a more lucrative business model than someone who does ransomware. And it's a little bit shift. Now I need to see where those numbers came from and everything. Sure. So let's just kind of temper it with that. But the point is that what the email side of things, the threats that are coming through email and the techniques are getting a lot better, and they're getting they look incredibly real. They look incredibly relevant to the person that's involved in the victim of the attack.
Yes.
And the amounts of money that we're seeing leave the door and that people are, unfortunately losing is continues to grow and grow and grow.
Yes.
So I would say those email threats, even with multi-factor authentication, is incredibly important to have that. But we're seeing attackers find ways to even get around that or to leverage that. And so, you got to stay on your top of your toes. If you implemented MFA, multi-factor authentication, a few years ago, you probably need to look at that and reconfigure it, because there's ways of doing multi-factor authentication today to deal with those emerging threats that didn't exist a few years ago. And fortunately, the technology providers of those MFA solutions have done their jobs and improved their products to deal with that. Now, on the other side of things, I would say, look, the vulnerability, threat actors taking advantage of vulnerabilities is the biggest one.
Okay.
I mean, we still see it. I mean, we have cases that come in that someone's has taken advantage of a firewall vulnerability. That sometimes that firewall vulnerability might have only been out a week. Sometimes it's been out months, and it was just never addressed.
Sure.
We've had cases where a company might have 20, firewalls, and they're all updated except for one.
Yeah. Right.
So all it takes is that one to get in. So that's really important. In the last couple of years, there's been quite a few vulnerabilities with Microsoft Exchange on premise. And, people rushed and patched those systems.
Right.
But what they didn't do was realize that they'd already been exploited. And so even though they patched it, that patching only help them if they hadn't been attacked yet. But if they had already been attacked, the damage had been done, the door was open, and so people could get in. I think today or yesterday, there was a release of a vulnerability with Chromium, which is which is Google Chrome, which a lot of applications use that have browser functionality. I had a friend of mine put it best. It's like if you have anything that displays GIFs or JPEGs from an online perspective, it's probably vulnerable. So
interesting.
There's been some updates about that, but the point I'm making is that's the biggest one right there, is the vulnerabilities and bad guys taking advantage of those vulnerabilities much more quickly than they ever have been. And sometimes they even, like in the case of this proxy shell one, the Exchange ones, they knew about the vulnerability before everybody else. So they were already in the systems before you even knew you had to patch those Exchange servers.
It's a 0 day, right? That's kind of the term used for that.
That's 0 day. What's interesting about that is I almost say that's almost like a negative day.
Right.
Because 0 day usually say, look, this is like right here and now, take care of it. And I think, Dan, that goes back to you talking about the difference between security and IT. IT says, hey, look, we'll get that patch and we'll get that scheduled during our maintenance window, right? Sure. Security says, hell no, you're going to patch and reboot that stuff right now.
Right.
It's better to disrupt the business than have the business compromised. So so that those are the main things we see, especially affecting small and medium-sized businesses.
For sure. Agreed. One of the business lines that we've started selling in the last year with our with our sort of, we have 3 tiers of product, and the client can get the sort of the medium tier, and that's what most people get. But with our 3rd tier, vulnerability management is added into that tier. And that's relatively new for us. Now, we normally, with the care and feeding of networks and computers and stuff, we patch stuff. There's some brackets around when and what we patch and what's billable and what's not. But we've added this whole other layer of vulnerability management, where we, use platforms that can report on the vulnerabilities daily or basically in real time. And then we sell our clients a bucket of hours to remediate those vulnerabilities, just month over month over month over month. And it turns into a program, as opposed to like a once a year project to go in and update all of your hardware and everything else. For small clients, I want to call this out for a second. For small businesses, you may want to ask your IT guy, well, when is the last time you patched your firewall or patched the switches or patched any other piece of hardware? And the answer might be never, because it's interruptive. It's kind of not at the front of mind. It's not something that's going to bug you about it inherently, so you do it. And when you're at a size where you start to consider an MSP, that's one of the big draws for you to move over to an MSP, because we can handle those things and we can understand when they need to be patched, and we can patch them and all that stuff. But then to understand the security that's wrapped around all that, that's why we augment with an MSSP. So I would say that vulnerability and email-based attack still, your clients need to be diligent in understanding how those things work, and understanding that their systems are being patched for vulnerabilities, or if they're not, evaluate a plan or establish a plan to get those things done, whether that's partnering with somebody like us, pulling a third-party consultant like Solis, or anything else. That needs to be front of mind for everybody throughout the next year. I love that feedback.
You're exactly right. And we also see, real quick,
yes, sir,
people have old systems that can't be patched anymore. And one of the things that comes up is, why is that on the network? And a lot of times you find out it doesn't even really, there is a purpose for it. So one of the examples to give, and it's been a while, is we had a company that had its own gas pump, right? Okay. And the system they had that managed that gas pump was like a Windows 7 machine.
Sure.
And that was end of life.
Yes.
By quite some time. We had that, and really but for them to upgrade that workstation, they'd have to upgrade the pump and replace the pump and everything else. So like from a business expense perspective, it was prohibitive. But then you say, well, why the heck is it on the network with everything else? Oh, that's a good point. It really doesn't need to be. We just need it there. Somebody can walk up to it and deal with that. So when you talk about remediation and mitigation, I mean, a lot of times you can patch and update, but other times, you guys have to go in there and say, no, we need to segment this network differently. And we need to think of things in a different way from the way your network is designed to deal with some of these issues, because it's not always about patching and updating.
Yeah, we see the same thing, and we see it a lot in apartment complexes. This is very common. They have a computer that manages the gate that opens in and out from the apartment complex. And that gate software is always, these sort of small manufacturers make it. And it's always on an old computer hidden somewhere in the back that can't be turned off, that can't be upgraded, that's running Windows XP or something crazy. We see that stuff all the time in that environment. And we have to make the decision, okay, can this thing get to the internet? Yes. Why does it need to get to the internet? Normally doesn't. We'll just kind of prevent it from getting to the internet and kind of wall it off a little bit on the network side. But we see the same thing, and it's wild. And we have to come in as consultants and say, okay, why is this here? What's the ramifications of it? And then if we had questions of it, we'd go to y'all, say, okay, here's the security ramifications. Am I looking at this the correct way? And John would pull somebody in, they talk to me and they go, yeah, I think you got it, or take this into consideration. But yeah, we see, that's fascinating. We see the exact same thing. We also see it in manufacturing. There'll be some manufacturing machine that has a computer that runs it, same exact thing. And we'll do a scan at new potential clients. We'll scan their environment. Why do you have Windows 7 computers? Why do you have Windows XP computers? It's always something like that. That's wild. I wanted to take a second, and I know we're kind of changing topics kind of suddenly here, but I want to talk about compliance and regulations. Y'all are going to be much more knowledgeable than I am. Although I have a lot of banking clients, y'all are involved in compliance and regulations and meeting those regulations day in and day out. So how important would you say compliance is in a day-to-day cybersecurity landscape? I mean, we know it's important, but what steps should businesses take to ensure that they're compliant? How would a small to mid-sized business that may not even know if they're compliant, how would they move forward with with addressing compliance issues? How would they tackle that in your opinion?
Yeah, so it's for small and medium-sized businesses, most of the time they don't recognize the need for regulatory compliance or anything of that nature until they've been compromised.
That's right.
And yeah,
right.
and then they're faced with, hey, what do I need to do? And so
Right.
It's different than publicly traded companies that have to be audited, or if you're even a private company in a very heavily like financial services, you kind of know already. So, we see that kind of shock factor come in when they find out that, holy moly, I had, I've had 700-800 employees over the last 10 years come and go. And now I've been compromised, and I had a spreadsheet full of their benefit information in there.
Yes.
And now I have to go out we have to go figure out a way to find all these people, figure out what states they live in, and then notify them based on each individual state's regulatory direction, right? So how they get in front of it, I think it's a two-pronged approach. I mean, number one is, having a privacy attorney, not your general business attorney, but somebody that specializes in this area, get to understand your business, and then talk to you about those different aspects. I mean, it really kind of starts with, how you do business, how your contracts are, the things that you'll agree to, the things that you won't agree to. A lot of small businesses don't think about that. And so that's where a privacy attorney can come in and get to know the business and learn the business. And then, from that perspective, that's when, someone like ourselves will come in and do an assessment and try to understand, okay, what is the gap or the gaps that are there that you need to close? I mean, we've seen companies, I talk about one that had data that they hadn't deleted since the year 2000, and they were involved in healthcare, and they had this is a 5-person organization. They had over 1 million health records. And so they had absolutely no concept, because if you looked at what they did, they weren't a healthcare provider.
Right.
They were behind the scenes doing some other type of audit and administrative work, but they had the data. And you could even say, well, you didn't even need all the data that you had. You only needed a piece of that. Yeah. But they never took the time to step back and go, oh man, we got a bunch more data than we actually need to do our jobs. They didn't have an attorney going, holy moly, I mean, you're a huge risk, from many different angles for having all this data. So so that's where I would say it's kind of a two-pronged approach. And then once you have those opinions and recommendations from both the legal side and the security side, then together they can work on a roadmap to get those things done. And obviously, work on the high priority stuff and work your way down the list.
That's terrific. I think it's easier for financial services clients because they're bound by whatever regulatory guidelines that they have, and it's just part of the business, and they have regs, they have to follow them, they get audited. It's normal operating procedure. But I like what you're saying. You may have a small business that isn't bound by PCI, isn't necessarily, HIPAA may apply, but they're not getting audited HIPAA wise. They're not in government, but they have a business and they're operating, and there's no real compliance related oversight to a small business. There's not a compliance team. There's no oversight in that way. So I love what you said. It is wise for them to pull in an attorney to evaluate their operations, sort of establish risk, and say, well, how long do you keep data? Where's data kept? Where's it backed up? And all these things. But then also to pull in somebody that's an expert like you, that's a security expert, to come in and look at their operations and establish, is this generalized IT security best practice? Yes or no? Is it NIST framework, best practice, those type of things? And then you can come in and you can say, okay, look, according to, our consultant's opinion on these things, this is what you would improve in, this is why, this is how you would get there, here you go. And that's incredibly powerful, because you just don't know when you're in a small business. You have no idea. And you don't have, until you get to 50, 100 people, you don't have anybody that's an expert in it. And pulling in somebody like y'all to evaluate that and provide direction is it's invaluable. It's invaluable.
That's one of the things that we're doing more and more of, is this incident response advisory program.
Yes. Okay.
That really provides that resource for the clients, right? To be able to come and talk to somebody who's been there, done that, and seen that, right? And has the relationships with lawyers and knows the ropes. So that's been a real valuable asset for the clients that we're partnering with.
Question for you. So can a business go right to you? I assume they can go right to you and work with you directly if they don't have an MSP.
Correct. Yes, they can.
That's terrific. So somebody could pull you in for those type of things. And it sounds like you have some type of program where they can pay, monthly maybe to be part of a program where you're evaluating those things and providing feedback and working on resolving issues and so forth.
Exactly. Or they may
Awesome.
have something that they just find that's suspicious that just needs somebody to go in and quickly triage to say, hey, look, this is fine. You contained it, you dealt with it, move on, or this is a bigger deal. It needs to be handled differently. So yeah, that's what that program is designed for.
That's terrific. That's terrific. It's good to know that not only the people that are listening to this that are in MSP industry can go to y'all and you can augment their MSP, but anybody, any small business owner can go to you and just basically ask questions and get you to review their stuff and provide a program for them to, get that help they need all the time. That's terrific. And really inherent into doing that, you're creating your own internal operations and regulations on how IT should work. And that's terrific, because if you have that in place, you're far, far ahead of somebody that doesn't.
No, you're exactly right. And what people need to understand too is that, look, there's ways of doing things that make sense for your business. So it's not necessarily like this hardcore recipe that everybody has to follow to the T. A lot of people think that, right? And that hardcore recipe could be very expensive. But with the right people involved in consulting and giving recommendations to you, a program can be tailored to meet those needs of your business without, spending a gazillion dollars.
That's terrific. That's terrific. So it sounds like you can evaluate scope and add things, remove things, expand things, and do that and really customize it for anybody that comes to you.
Right.
And it's not just this pay $400,000, you get this widget and that's it. So that sounds wonderful. The next topic, if I can segue into that smoothly, is trends and predictions, which is similar to the emerging threats, really. But outside of that, as far as trends and predictions, do you see anything maybe from the solutions layer that you see that's coming in the future? As an example, next gen AV. So we jumped on the next gen AV bandwagon in the last couple of years. I believe that all MSPs are going to be jumping on the next gen AV bandwagon, and also zero trust. But related to those subjects, or any other technological solutions or anything like that you think will be a trend that people adopt in the next few years?
Yeah. So I think on next gen AV, you're right. Everybody's needs to move to that. I think they really won't have an option. I think you're going to see that space consolidate to a certain extent. I mean, there's just a lot of different players out there, and a lot of them are good, but I think, over the next couple of years, you're going to finally see some consolidation and simplification in that area for people. But as you mentioned, zero trust, and, when we can really kind of focus on zero trust network access, which in layman's terms, I just like to call next generation VPN.
Okay.
Even though probably the zero trust vendors don't like that term, but really, I think it's extending what we've been doing from a security perspective out to these other platforms, whether that's a software as a service that you're using, or it's you've moved your infrastructure to the cloud, or part of your infrastructure to the cloud. A lot of times people make sure that they have that security and remote access tied down for their stuff on-prem.
Sure.
And they kind of defer to those cloud-based companies that they're using these systems from for security. But I think what people are going to see is that they need to have that security blanket, per se, that they've had over their on-prem extended out. Okay. And then when you talk about the concept of zero trust, I mean, that's exactly right. It's no longer can you have somebody remote in at 8 o'clock in the morning and say, well, you have full access to the network for as long as your session is. Sure. There has to be checks, and there's got to be checks throughout the day and throughout, you're working in this platform for 2 hours and all of a sudden you want to access or something like that. Well, how as a system can I trust that that's you from your device, from your location? And so those things are going to be incredibly important. So I think, that secure access at the edge, which the edge is now pretty much anywhere, is where you're going to see a lot of movement and a lot of focus. I know, I have a friend of mine that she has a startup where she's basically, a lot of people will find out that their cloud is not secure after the fact. So, her solution comes in and tries to get in front of that. So you say, hey, look, we're going to make sure things are done securely especially from a configuration perspective as part of that migratory process. So you're not learning it the hard way when someone's compromised that cloud, and you're like, yeah, well, we were going to get around to security, but that was step 25 on the project plan.
Right. We see that, and it's really disappointing when really your next big initiative is X, and then some security event happens and you should have had X done. That's really, I mean, it's one thing for you to go in front of your boss and go, well, we were about to do that. That's a hard discussion to have. Even if you were, it's really, really hard. And that's tough when our clients have to do that. Or, what we see often is we'll take on a new client, and that client's literally onboarding with us, which for us, it's, 30 days of prep, and then we turn on the systems, and then we move forward for another 30 days. But what we see during the onboarding process is that client is attacked before we've even taken them on. Yeah. It's wild. It's wild about all this stuff. But then the client says, well, I made the decision to go with IronEdge, so that's great. But it's a wild thing. Question for you, related to zero trust and the tech and next gen AV. So here's a question. I've heard and read some that AI helps to is kind of fuels those same things to create logic and to let those things learn and grow. Is that accurate, or am I just reading crazy stuff?
No, it's definitely accurate. But what I would say with what AI is really beneficial, and when I would still say this is kind of early from where we're seeing AI being applied, is that it's helping tune out the noise. So that's always the challenge. With you get 1,000 alerts coming in, and you're like, well, holy crap, I have to go through all 1,000 of them, and I got to go through 900 of them and find out I missed the one that I should have been paying attention to. So I think that's where AI is going to come in. And I also think AI is going to come in, and you're starting to see this where it may not actually be doing the task, but it may be recommending a task or a couple of options to somebody to say, hey, look, this particular situation looks like this, feels like this. We recommend you do one or two of these things, and then that person can then make that judgment. And I think over time you'll see it get a little bit more automated, but I'm yet personally to trust AI to go that next step of just automating, kind of self-driving, if you want to call it that, because it could do more damage than good. So you still need that human set of eyes to sit there and kind of translate what that AI is telling you, and take make a decision on that. But I think it's going to shorten the time for that person to make a decision. And again, it's going to allow the people that need to be looking at the things that matter, be able to focus and on those things that matter, and be able to ignore the noise that a lot of these things generate.
That's terrific.
Speaking of AI, I think the big concern on the chatter is the bad actors leveraging AI to continually improve and come up with new ideas and new ways to compromise our clients.
Well,
so
that's an exact good point. I mean, the same tools that are available to us on the good side are available to them on the bad side.
Right.
And John has made a good point is, if you almost need to use, let me say almost, you do need to embrace AI, because you're going to need it to be able to fight that battle, because if they have AI and you don't, they're going to have a leg up. So that's a very good point, John, about we think about AI from how it can benefit our business, but we also need to be thinking about how it can disrupt or even potentially destroy our business.
Terrific feedback. I wanted to call out one thing that you said that's very valuable to us. So we have and I think most MSPs have this issue where they receive 10,000 alerts a night across all of their client machines and everything else. And it's up to their service team or their NOC to go through this thing and be like, I don't know what can be deleted, or I don't know what's important, or I don't know how to find what's important. That's a really big problem for MSPs, no matter the size. And once you turn on a bunch of systems, that just happens. So what we do is we leverage y'all to go through that stuff and to pick out the things that need to be remediated or acted on or whatever, and then you notify us. That's a huge value add. It's really, really important for us, because we're getting overwhelmed in alerts from different systems, and that's something that y'all do for us, and that's terrific.
Terrific. I mean, you bring up a great point. I mean, we see examples of where somebody that's been, they come to us because they're under a live attack. We start to dig into from a forensics perspective, and we see an alert from months prior. I mean, we're talking 6-9 months prior. And that alert was just not investigated enough, right? They thought, well, we took that machine offline and we re-imaged it. Well, no, that was just a single alert, and that's a very easy kind of conclusion to come to. But if they would have taken the time and even, had somebody like us kind of dig a little deeper, we would have said, no, someone has completely compromised your network. You don't realize. Most likely they've compromised every password in your environment. You need to take more steps than just, handling that one workstation. So you're right. I mean, it is, you can't, you got a lot of times something may seem more simple than it actually is. And having someone like us run, ride shotgun alongside your team, working together, you can make sure that, we're watching your back and while you're watching your clients' backs.
That's exactly
kind of
right.
What differentiates Solis, I think, from a lot of other security providers is because of our experience with incident response and all the cases that we handle. We catch things, we're able to see things from that perspective because we've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, you can read all the books in the world, but it doesn't add up to the experience of seeing it real world.
Absolutely.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I had the exact discussion with a client earlier today. I was in their technology committee, and they asked me a great question. They said, "Can your team somehow take the content of an incoming ticket and make these things sort of automatically happen from the content?" I said, "Not really." I said, "We have to have somebody that sees it, reads the ticket detail, can think, oh, that may be this thing. I need to go look at it." That human component is just in IT, whether I'd like it to be or not. It's always going to be there. There's always somebody somewhere that's to look at something, goes, "No, we need to escalate this. This is a problem. I saw it 10 years ago," whatever.
Yeah.
But that's AI may help call those things out in the future, but it's not going to replace the human component of it.
No, you're right.
Well, gentlemen, this has actually been a lot of fun, and the time went by very, very quickly. And we would love to work with you on more of these in the future. I can speak from all of us at IronEdge. Y'all are a terrific partner, and I suggest any MSP that's looking for an MSSP partner to give you a buzz and kind of chit chat with y'all. And any small business, I would be comfortable saying, go to John, go to Chris, and talk to them about what they can help you with.
Well, we're here. We're working all the time, whether we like it.
I bet.
You can call us at 2:00 in the afternoon or 2:00 in the morning.
Right.
We're going to pick up. So
that's right.
Thanks,
awesome.
Thanks, Dan, for having us. I mean,
y'all are awesome,
great.
Dan. It's a pleasure working with IronEdge. You guys are great.
Thank you very much. And I want to tell everyone, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comments that you want to drop in the chat below this, please do so, or you can reach out to us in any number of ways. You can find our information on our website, on our YouTube. You can look up Solis Security. That's SOLIS Security, and you can get a hold of them. And I will cut this thing off now, and I will see you all in the future. So thank you. Bye, everybody.
Take care, Dan.